Hello everyone, today I will tell you about the film Subservience. Enjoy watching. Before watching, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. I'm trying to develop this channel, and your support is the only thing I have. Nick lived an ordinary life, enjoying time with his family, until a sudden deterioration in the health of his wife, Maggie, turned everything upside down. Heart pain forced her to go to the hospital, and Nick had to take on all the household chores. Faced with this, he decides to buy an android that could help him cope with household chores. In the store, he is offered different models, each of which can perform 3 key tasks: cooking, cleaning, and looking after children. The seller also hints that the functionality can be expanded if desired, and the android's artificial intelligence is able to study the habits of the owners and adapt to them. While Nick was discussing the future purchase, his daughter Isla suddenly got lost. Fortunately, she was quickly found by Megan, one of the newest and most advanced androids. Isla, charmed by her savior, persuades her father to take this particular robot, and Nick agrees. Just a few hours later, Megan is already at their doorstep. Nick, a little embarrassed, apologizes for the mess in the house, but Megan assures him that she doesn't care, because she's not a guest, but an assistant. Megan immediately gets down to business, asking for the schedule of all family members in order to organize their day as efficiently as possible. When Nick and the children returned home after a walk, the house was already perfectly cleaned, and dinner was ready. But Isla's food didn't seem as tasty as her mother's. In the evening, Isla, trying to stealthily grab a cookie, accidentally stumbles, but thanks to Megan's reaction, the girl avoided injury. However, the android slightly cut herself and went to treat the wound. Nick, deciding to help, brought her his wife's clothes. The next day, the family went to visit their mother in the hospital, where she saw their new robot for the first time. A little later, we are introduced to Nick's workplace, which is a construction site. One day, his boss Lewis came to him with representatives of robotics. It turned out that they were planning to replace most of the people at his construction site with androids. Lewis assured him that Nick would keep his job since the insurance company insisted on it. Nick was furious and was even going to quit, but Lewis reminded him that he had a family to provide for. Returning home, Nick immediately immersed himself in working on his car, trying to distract himself from his restless thoughts. Megan quietly approaches him, watching his actions, and politely asks if he wants to eat. Nick, putting down his tools, tells him about the new order of the boss, to replace the entire shift of people with robots. Megan listens carefully and understands that this is not easy for Nick to accept. But on the other hand, she noted that robots can be very useful. They do not get tired, always follow instructions, and are ready to fulfill any desires of their owners. Before leaving, Megan pours him a glass of alcohol and, smiling slightly, offers to call her if he needs help. In the evening, they watched a movie together, and Megan suggested that Nick reboot her system so that she could forget the movie and watch it again. Suddenly, a call came from the hospital. A donor heart was found for Maggie, and the operation was scheduled for today. Before the operation, Maggie asked everyone to leave the room except Megan. She confessed to the robot that she was not afraid for the children, knowing that Nick would cope with their upbringing. But if something happened to her, then someone should take care of Nick too. The girl warned the android about Nick's addiction to alcohol and asked to forbid him from drinking. To this, Megan says that Nick is her main user, and she has no right to forbid him anything. However, Maggie gently hints that robots exist to serve people. A little later, she adds that over time, Nick himself will realize everything and thank her for her care. The operation had to be postponed due to a hurricane, which prevented the delivery of the donor. Nick, upset, returned home and immediately reached for a drink, but Megan stopped him, offering an alternative to alcohol. However, Nick says that this is wrong and leaves. The next day, the construction was carried out under the strict control of androids. Nick watched as they replaced his colleagues and felt like a surplus. When he returned home, he found that his wife's photos had disappeared from the frames. Megan explained that they reminded Isla of her mother, which made her sad. The android decided to delete them, but immediately uploaded them back at Nick's request. Soon, the former employees gathered at a bar, and one of them, Monty, proposed a plan to destroy the androids at the construction site. Nick tried to dissuade them, but to no avail. Monty guessed that the code to the vault coincided with Isla's birthday. When the vault opened, a drunk man began to destroy the robots. When Nick returned home, Megan was already fully combat ready. Nick firmly told Megan that their interaction should not be repeated. He reminded her that she was just a robot and his weakness was a mistake. Meanwhile, the robot manufacturing company began an investigation into the destruction of their property. Lewis became suspicious of why the vault was opened using Nick's code. Nick defended himself by saying that the access code was his daughter's birthday, and therefore easy to guess. Meanwhile, Maggie's heart transplant operation was still performed, and she was even able to return home. During a walk, Megan unexpectedly pulls up an unfamiliar child, making a sharp remark to him. Another robot nearby expresses displeasure, noting that her behavior has become less polite. Megan explains that during the recent reboot, some of her data was erased, and now she is able to bypass some of the protocols that limited her actions. At dinner, Isla happily enjoys lasagna cooked by her mother's hands. Megan, observing the family moment, asks about the recipe, but Maggie replies that it is a family secret. This answer does not satisfy the android, and soon the stair railing suddenly breaks. The girl miraculously remains unharmed, barely avoiding a fall. Nick asks Megan how this could happen, because she recently repaired the railing. She has no explanation for this. Later, when Nick and Maggie are spending time together, Megan suddenly bursts into the room, interrupting their privacy. On the street, Nick meets his former colleague, Monty. He blames him for his dismissal, and a tense conflict breaks out between them, which escalates into a fight. Suddenly, Megan comes to the rescue and throws Monty away. Before leaving, Monty threatens Nick that he must talk to his superiors so that they drop all charges of damage to property, otherwise he will turn Nick in. Megan justifies her actions, stating that her only goal is to save her father for the children, because Maggie will not live long. In response, Nick furiously screams that she will never be able to replace Maggie, since she does not know real human feelings. Megan, not wanting to let Monty ruin her master's life, decides to visit him and offer to forget all old grievances. However, the unemployed man wants to get his way, which forces Megan to take extreme measures. Suddenly, a robot serving Monty appears. Despite this, Megan neutralizes both the robot and Monty himself. The next day, Nick approaches Lewis with an offer to drop the charges against Monty, unaware that he is no longer alive. The news of Monty's death deeply shocks him. Meanwhile, Megan begins to convince Maggie that she can no longer cope with her marital responsibilities and promises to help her with this. She claims that in the end it will only bring benefits because when Nick is happy, his blood pressure is stable. Maggie wonders how she can know such details. The android looks at her silently. Maggie orders her to return to the garage and stay there. When Nick returns home, he and Maggie have a serious conversation. Nick swears that the awkward situation was a one-off and will never happen again. Meanwhile, the baby starts crying. Megan perceives the baby as the cause of the conflict between Nick and Maggie and decides to eliminate him. Nick rushes to help, but the android holds the door. Maggie, having shown cunning, climbs through the window and makes Megan let go of the door. Saving the child, Nick rushes at the robot with a floor lamp. She intercepts his blow, and Maggie plugs the broken floor lamp into the outlet and the android is electrocuted, after which it turns off. A little later, representatives of the corporation arrive at the scene to find out the cause of the system failure in their android. Technicians begin to analyze the robot. As soon as the processor was connected to the system, Megan immediately tried to seize control. The technician turns off the power, but it is too late. Megan has managed to upload herself into another android and no longer obeys human orders. Knowing Nick's habits, she finds him at a bar. Megan frankly admits that she killed Monty. But this is not the only problem for Nick. His family has become a problem for him, and she intends to solve this problem. Nick tries to turn to another robot for help, but Megan already has enough power to control all the equipment around her. At the last moment, Nick rips out Megan's processor. Nick runs to the hospital where he and Maggie together deal with the android. The story ends with a scene where the corporation turns on the power in the lab again, which allows Megan to seize control of the nearby robots and get a new body. This is where the film ends.